The huge glass halls of the Space Defense Council filled with loud alien laughter. Commander Davis stepped forward to show what Earth wanted to give for the war. Next to him stood his helper, Officer Williams, holding a computer pad with their offer. Only 10,000 soldiers. The alien leader Vextar opened his 6 eyes wide in shock. The Blue Star Empire is sending 50 million fighters. The Metal People are giving 100 million troops. And you humans bring just 10,000. Captain Brown, Earth's military representative, kept his face calm even as more aliens started laughing at them. His scarred face told stories of many battles, but none of these space creatures cared to notice. Maybe they don't understand how big this war really is, said another alien leader, her snake-like body twisting as she smiled. Their tiny group could watch over some supply boxes in a safe place far away. Colonel Jackson stood straight next to Captain Brown and looked quickly at Sergeant Thompson. They had seen this happen before. These aliens only cared about big numbers, not about what really mattered in fighting. The main alien leader made his choice fast and without much thought. Fine then. Send the humans to guard Post 7. It's just a place where we keep supplies way out on the edge of space. Nothing dangerous ever happens there. They can pretend to be real soldiers while the big armies fight the real enemy. Commander Davis nodded once. We'll take that job. When the big meeting ended, aliens from different worlds kept making jokes about what Earth was bringing to help win the war. None of them saw the quiet strength in the humans' eyes. They didn't bother to learn about the terrible fights these soldiers had already won to get this far. Captain Brown had fought on 12 different worlds where humans were outnumbered 100 to 1. Officer Williams had survived 3 years on a planet where the air tried to kill you every day. Colonel Jackson had led troops through battles where they had to make weapons from broken ship parts just to stay alive. Sergeant Thompson had grown up in the worst parts of Earth where you learned to fight or you didn't live to see your next birthday. These weren't soft people who had lived easy lives. They were humans who had crawled through hell and came out stronger. The aliens laughed because they saw small numbers. They didn't understand that humans had learned to fight differently than everyone else. When other species had millions of soldiers, they could afford to lose thousands and still win. When humans only had a few people, every single person had to be worth 100 enemies. Commander Davis watched the alien leaders walk away, still chuckling about Earth's tiny army. He remembered his grandfather's words from the old wars back on Earth. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. These space creatures were about to learn something important about humans. They were about to discover why Earth had never been conquered, even when bigger and stronger enemies had tried. They would understand why human history was full of stories about small groups doing impossible things when everything looked hopeless. The aliens thought they were giving humans a job that didn't matter, somewhere safe where they couldn't mess up the real fighting. What they didn't know was that humans had a special talent for turning safe places into the most dangerous spots in any war. As the human team walked out of the Great Hall, they could still hear alien voices making fun of their small numbers. Captain Brown smiled for the first time that day. He had heard that same laughter before, right before his enemies learned what a mistake they had made. The war was just starting, and these proud alien species were about to get an education they would never forget. They were about to learn why smart people never laughed at humans, no matter how few there were. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would understand what 10,000 human soldiers could really do when they stopped playing nice and started playing to win. 3 weeks passed, and the supply base called Guard Post 7 was buzzing with activity. Sergeant Major Johnson was checking all the defense systems while Officer Davis made lists of all their equipment and supplies. The humans had changed the basic storage area into something that looked more like a military fortress. "I'm seeing movement on the sensors, sir," shouted Corporal Mitchell from his computer station. Captain Rodriguez walked over to the big screen where Private Taylor was watching several moving dots that meant trouble was coming. "Looks like around 300 enemy scouts," she said, counting the signals. "This is probably their first attack group." Colonel Martinez smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "They probably think we'll be easy to beat." Far away, the enemy commander was looking at the small human base through his special viewing device. He made clicking sounds that showed he was pleased with what he saw. The reports his spies had given him said that humans were weak creatures who walked on 2 legs and couldn't fight very well. 300 of his best warriors against maybe 50 humans seemed like it would be over very quickly. "Start the attack," he told his troops. "Make it fast and don't destroy too much. We need that supply base in good condition when we're done." The first group of enemy soldiers rushed toward the human positions, but they immediately ran into something they had never seen before. Instead of running away scared or giving up, the humans fought back with teamwork and shooting that was amazingly accurate. Sergeant Major Johnson's voice could be heard all across the fighting area. Taylor, Mitchell, shoot at Section 7 to keep them back. Davis, get ready with that special thing we talked about. The enemy soldiers thought they would win easily by having more fighters, but instead they found themselves fighting against soldiers who used every rock, every corner, and every tool they had with deadly skill. Private Taylor had spent her childhood hunting in the mountains where one missed shot meant no food for days. Corporal Mitchell grew up in a city where you learned to watch every shadow and every sound or you didn't make it home safely. These weren't people who panicked when things got dangerous. The humans moved like they had practiced this fight 1,000 times before. When the enemy attacked from the left, human soldiers were already waiting behind rocks and broken equipment. When they tried to circle around the right side, they found traps that had been set up days earlier. Officer Davis pressed a button, and suddenly the ground shook as explosions went off in places the enemy didn't expect. The humans had buried surprise bombs in spots where attackers would naturally try to hide. What looked like normal dirt and rocks became deadly traps. Captain Rodriguez watched the battle through his binoculars and smiled. The enemy had made the same mistake that everyone made when fighting humans. They looked at the numbers and thought that was all that mattered. They didn't understand that humans had been fighting against bad odds for thousands of years. The enemy commander watched his troops struggling against the small human force and felt confused. His soldiers were trained killers who had won battles on dozens of worlds. They had weapons that could cut through metal and armor that could stop most attacks. So why were they having trouble with these weak humans? As the fight went on for 3 hours, something started to worry the enemy leader. His forces weren't winning like they should have been. These humans weren't just fighting back, they were getting better at it as the battle continued. Every time his troops tried a new attack, the humans figured out how to stop it faster than before. Corporal Mitchell noticed that the enemy soldiers always made the same movements before they attacked. He started calling out warnings to his friends, telling them exactly where the next attack would come from. Private Taylor saw that the enemy weapons took a few seconds to charge up between shots, so she timed her movements to stay safe during those moments. The humans were doing something that scared the enemy commander more than any big army could have. They were learning, changing, and becoming more dangerous with every minute that passed. His intelligence reports had been completely wrong about these creatures. They weren't weak at all, they were something much worse. They were smart, tough, and they refused to give up no matter how bad things looked. The battle was far from over, but already the enemy was starting to understand they had made a terrible mistake. They had laughed at the small human army, but now they were beginning to realize why that might have been the worst decision of their lives. The news about what the humans were doing spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could believe. In military bases on hundreds of different worlds, alien commanders looked at battle reports that made no sense according to everything they knew about fighting wars. Admiral Carter got an emergency message from General Brooks back at Earth's main command center. "Carter, what in the world is happening out there? We're getting stories that sound completely crazy." "Not crazy at all, sir," Carter answered from his battlefield headquarters, where Major Wilson was talking to alien military groups that had been scattered and beaten. "This is just what humans do." The enemy force had grown to more than 2,000 fighters, but the small group of human soldiers wasn't just surviving anymore. They had started attacking back and winning. Captain Anderson's new fighting methods were being copied by alien troops in other battles because Colonel Foster was teaching them how to do it. All across that part of space, alien military leaders saw things they had never witnessed before. Corporal Jackson had taken ordinary supply boxes and turned them into weapons that could shoot far distances. Private Martinez had changed the machines used for moving cargo into moving shields and gun platforms. The humans weren't just using their regular weapons anymore, they were fighting with absolutely everything they could find. The enemy's top general sent a worried message to his leaders: "These creatures don't fight like any species we've ever met. They changed their methods right in the middle of battle. They use ground and buildings that we thought were worthless. They take things that should help us and somehow make them work against us instead." Back at the human base, Sergeant Major Davis was teaching alien soldiers who had escaped from other defeated bases something completely new. He was showing them the human idea of using whatever you can find to get the job done. These alien species had always won fights by having more soldiers or better technology than their enemies. Now they were learning to think like humans, creative, smart about using resources, and never, ever giving up. Private Martinez showed a group of tall, blue-skinned aliens how to turn broken spaceship parts into traps. She took pieces of metal that most people would throw away and made them into devices that could stop enemy vehicles. The aliens watched with amazement as she explained that humans learned to do this because they rarely had enough of the things they needed. Corporal Jackson taught some four-armed aliens how to make bombs using cleaning supplies and spare electronics. Back on Earth, he had grown up in a place where you had to be creative to survive. Now he was using those same skills to help win a space war. The aliens had never thought about fighting this way because they always had proper military equipment. Captain Anderson spent hours explaining to alien commanders why humans fought differently. When you have 1,000,000 soldiers, you can afford to lose 10,000 and still win, he told them. When you only have 50 soldiers, every single person has to count for something special. We learned to make every shot matter, every movement count, and every resource work twice as hard. The alien survivors started copying human methods in their own battles. A group of insect-like aliens used human techniques to hold off an enemy force 5 times their size. Some crystal-based creatures learned to set traps the way humans did and save their home planet. Robot-like aliens discovered how to fix their damaged equipment using human problem-solving methods. Major Wilson received reports from 17 different alien species saying they wanted to learn more human fighting techniques. Word was spreading that these small groups of humans had figured out something that big armies with fancy weapons had missed. The enemy commanders started getting worried reports from their own troops. Their soldiers were saying that the aliens they fought now acted differently. Instead of running away or fighting in predictable ways, they were doing unexpected things that seemed to come from human training. The tide of the whole war was changing because humans had taught other species something important. You don't win fights by being bigger or having better equipment. You win by being smarter, more creative, and by refusing to quit even when everything looks hopeless. One impossible human victory was leading to another, and soon the entire galaxy would understand why Earth had never been conquered despite being such a small planet in such a big universe. The enemy's main war fleet decided to send 15,000 of their best soldiers to destroy what their spies still called the human problem. They thought this would end their embarrassment quickly and show the galaxy that humans weren't special after all. But instead of finding a small group of soldiers hiding behind rocks, they discovered something that broke every rule they knew about fighting wars. Officer Davis had set up communication systems that connected 17 different types of alien species, creating a command structure that had never existed before in galactic history. This is Captain Rodriguez speaking to everyone. His voice reached fighters across the entire battlefield. Remember, we don't fight to look good, we fight to go home alive. Major Thompson took charge of organizing the defense while Sergeant Johnson led mixed teams of humans and aliens who worked together to stop enemy infiltrators. Things that should have been impossible were happening every single day now. The makeshift weapons that Corporal Williams had invented were now being built by alien engineers at 12 different military bases. The fighting techniques that Private Chen had developed were being studied and copied by species who had never thought about war the way humans did. The enemy found themselves fighting not just against humans anymore, but against aliens who had learned to think like humans. Every time they tried to retreat and regroup, they walked into carefully planned traps. Every time they attacked, they met resistance that changed and adapted faster than they could respond. Every decision their commanders made was met with creative solutions they had never seen before. Private Chen had taught a group of 6-legged aliens how to move silently through metal corridors using techniques she learned growing up in Earth's crowded cities. These aliens had always relied on their natural armor for protection, but now they understood the value of not being seen in the first place. Corporal Williams showed some floating aliens how to use their ability to fly in ways that confused enemy targeting systems. Instead of flying in straight lines like they always had, they learned to move unpredictably, making them almost impossible to hit with standard weapons. Sergeant Johnson worked with a group of aliens who could change colors to match their surroundings. He taught them how to use this ability not just to hide, but to create confusion and make the enemy think there were soldiers in places where no one actually was. The enemy's intelligence officers sent worried reports back to their commanders. The aliens are learning to fight like humans. This way of thinking is spreading to other species. Colonel Martinez smiled when she heard about that report. Spreading was exactly the right word. The human way of fighting, change when you need to, overcome problems with creativity, survive no matter what it costs, was spreading to alien species who had never needed to think this way before. Major Thompson received messages from alien commanders asking for more human advisors. A species that looked like walking trees wanted to learn human camouflage techniques. Some aliens that lived underwater wanted to know how humans fought in places where they couldn't breathe properly. The enemy had expected to face predictable alien armies that would either run away or fight in ways they understood. Instead, they found themselves fighting against creative, adaptive opponents who seemed to have an answer for everything. Captain Rodriguez watched the battle reports coming in from across the sector. Alien forces that had been losing badly were now winning fights they should have lost. The human approach to warfare was proving to be like a virus, but a good virus that made other species stronger and smarter. The enemy's field marshal sent an emergency message to his home world. We are no longer fighting separate alien species with predictable tactics. We are fighting a unified force that thinks like these humans. They turn our strengths into weaknesses and find opportunities where we see only problems. The war's momentum was changing completely. What had started as aliens laughing at a small human contribution was turning into the galaxy's greatest military revolution. Species that had fought the same way for thousands of years were discovering new possibilities they had never imagined. The humans hadn't just brought 10,000 soldiers to the war. They had brought a completely different way of thinking about survival, and now that thinking was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The enemy was learning too late that when humans decide to teach, the entire universe becomes their classroom. Six months had passed since the aliens first laughed at Earth's small army, and now the same huge glass halls of the Space Defense Council looked completely different. The meeting today wasn't filled with laughter and jokes. Instead, it was serious and respectful. Ambassador Vextar stood in front of Admiral Carter, but everything about the alien leader had changed. His 6 eyes looked down with respect instead of looking down with mockery. His voice was humble instead of proud. Admiral Carter, speaking for the entire Space Defense Council, I officially ask that Earth send military teachers to help train our combined forces, Vextar announced to the crowded room. Behind him, dozens of alien military commanders waited quietly and respectfully, a huge change from the laughing crowd 6 months earlier. Captain Rodriguez, who now wore the higher rank symbols of a full colonel, stood next to General Brooks, who had traveled all the way from Earth just for this special ceremony. Colonel Foster had been chosen to lead the new Human Military Teaching Corps, a job that would spread human fighting knowledge across the galaxy. The Great War didn't end because the biggest armies won, announced Counselor Murdan to everyone gathered there. It ended because human-led forces did things we thought could never be done. Sergeant Major Davis stood proudly with his team, but they all looked different now too. Corporals Mitchell and Taylor had both been promoted to higher ranks because of their brave fighting. Officer Williams now ran a communication department that helped 17 different alien military groups work together like never before. Major Wilson stepped forward to present the final numbers from the war to the shocked council members. The human forces hadn't just held onto their unimportant supply base. They had also trained and organized alien troops who took back 4 to 7 important military positions that everyone thought were lost forever. The numbers were incredible. Human-trained forces had won battles against odds of 20 to 1. Alien species that had been losing the war were suddenly winning fights they should have lost easily. Military positions that the enemy had held for months were taken back in days once human tactics were applied. Colonel Rodriguez explained how they did it. We taught them that every broken piece of equipment could become a weapon. Every pile of rocks could become a fortress. Every disadvantage could be turned into an advantage if you thought about it the right way. Private Chen, now promoted to sergeant, had trained over 300 alien soldiers in urban combat techniques. Species that had never fought in cities before learned how to use buildings, saws, and even trash as tools for victory. Corporal Jackson, also promoted, had taught alien engineers how to build weapons from spare parts and everyday items. Aliens who had always relied on factory-made military equipment discovered they could create effective tools from almost anything. After the public ceremony ended, Ambassador Vextar spoke privately with Admiral Carter. We measured your strength all wrong, the alien leader admitted, his voice full of genuine regret. We only counted how many soldiers you had. We should have measured how determined those soldiers were. Colonel Rodriguez's answer was simple and honest. We don't win fights because we're bigger or have better equipment. We win because we never learned how to give up. The truth was that humans had been fighting against impossible odds for their entire history. Every human soldier had grown up hearing stories about small groups of people who faced giant armies and somehow found ways to win. This wasn't unusual for humans, this was just Tuesday. As the human team got ready to return to Earth, they carried with them official requests from dozens of different alien species. Every one of these species wanted formal agreements to work with human military forces. Some wanted human advisors to train their troops. Others wanted to send their best soldiers to Earth for advanced training. The galaxy had learned something important that day. Size doesn't decide who wins wars, and the most dangerous armies aren't always the ones with the most soldiers. Sometimes the scariest enemy is the one who refuses to quit no matter how bad things look. The alien species had made a mistake that many others had made throughout human history. They looked at humans and saw weakness where they should have seen strength. They saw small numbers where they should have seen efficiency. They saw a species that looked soft where they should have seen the most stubborn survivors in the known universe. The tiny army that they had laughed at 6 months earlier had completely changed what it meant to be powerful among the stars. The humans had proven that 10,000 soldiers who refused to quit were worth more than 1,000,000 soldiers who gave up when things got difficult. As the human ships prepared to leave for home, the alien leaders finally understood why Earth had never been conquered despite being such a small planet in such a vast universe.